Hey guys, today we are looking at Ezekiel chapters 16 to 18. If you have done some pre-reading for reading through these chapters, you'll quickly discover how hectic these few chapters are, which is keeping in sort of the ongoing theme through the book of Ezekiel. Whereas Isaiah and Jeremiah that we've already looked at last year are hectic in their own ways. Ezekiel takes the sort of rhetoric from the prophets about telling people that they ought to turn away from their sin and trust in the Lord. Otherwise, God is going to give them over sort of to their own sinfulness, which means they're going to face war and exile and that's pretty difficult pill to swallow in and of itself, this pill of judgment. Ezekiel takes those messages and ramps them up a few hundred degrees, I think. And so in chapter 16 in particular, if you've read it, it might be a chapter that triggers something for you. The people of Israel are described here as basically a kid, a woman a kid who is born to these foreigners, sort of the natives in the land. And chapter 16 basically retells the whole story of how the Israelite people came into being, but it does it in this metaphor type language. And so it starts off by saying that you were born by these Canaanites, Hittites, and Amorites. Those were some of the local people of the land of Canaan, which later became Israel. And this is Abraham's story as he came into the land. And they were born, but there was nothing good about them at all. They were kind of born naked, bloody. Their cord wasn't cut. And they were naked, and they just walked around this way until the Lord finds them. And the Lord described himself here as this groom, because wedding imagery is rife throughout the Bible. And it's a great way to illustrate just how deeply God loves his people, but also how deeply he is committed to his people. And that's best expressed through this sort of marriage covenant language. And so God says he finds this woman who is sort of lost, abandoned, naked, dirty, and he covers her. He covers her with his own sort of garments, and he clothes her in rich regalia and jewelry and clothing, and just gives her gift after gift, and brings her back dignity and honor, and gives her all basically just this incredible promise and inheritance. The Israelites were these nobodies with no history or heritage, nothing about themselves that made themselves impeccable or amazing in any way, and yet God finds them, and he clothes them, and he takes them in, and he basically marries these people. He makes them his own and gives out of his abundance, out of his love to this person. And yet, the story takes this twist. So despite being discovered and found and loved and gifted and included as family, this woman, Israel, the people of Israel, take the gifts that God has given them and basically turns them around and gives them out to others, to other lovers, to other males. And this is describing the Israelites' tendency to worship other gods. And this gets described very graphically, that the woman, the wife, Israel, is basically like this woman who basically tears off all her rings and clothes and all the garments she's been clothed in, and she sort of gives them out as payment to these other gods and goddesses, these other lovers, to say, I'm running after you, I'm giving you myself. And eventually you're kind of, this woman is left naked and exposed and this really graphic sexual language about these people taking advantage of her, but giving her nothing in return. That she's giving her stuff and her allegiance to these other lovers, and yet she gets nothing in return from them. And this is the picture of the Israelites going after other things. Idolatry is the big word for that, worshiping other gods. We may think we don't have that same sort of problem today because we don't, go to the shrine of Zeus or, go down to the local temple of Thor and give our tithes and offerings and any of that stuff. Yet we are a nation full of idols, that we give our allegiance, our time, our energy, our money, our attention over to other things in hopes that we will gain something back from them. So whether that's, pursuing our work in hopes to get more money, to have a bigger house, or whatever it may be, we're looking for popularity or sex or whatever, that we are still constantly giving over ourselves to other people, giving our allegiance and hoping that we get something back, sort of neglecting the God who's given us his all, and we're not satisfied with that. And so this is the picture of what people, how Israel gets described back then. And it's this really graphic picture of this woman being taken advantage of. And I don't want to use stronger language to describe it because it's pretty strong enough in the passage itself, but it's not a really good scene. And the purpose of this is to describe how much of a tragedy this situation is. That when we are nobodies and we get welcomed in and invited into the family of the King who gives us his all, then we just turn around and sort of prostitute ourselves out, going looking for any other lover to give us some kind of affection or attention or gift that we already have from God, and yet we get nothing in return. And eventually those things in this passage will consume us. They will overtake us. And it's a really sad picture. But the intention that Ezekiel has is that this is exactly what it looks like when we run after other things other than God. That's a really graphic, vivid picture of what life looks like without God. And so we are called to embrace our love for God and run after him instead, to be with people full of hearts of gratitude that God has welcomed us in, that he's lavished everything upon us from the store of his own love and wealth, and that we don't need anything else. And I think this is a really vivid picture for us to grab onto today. And as we read this, we are meant to ask ourselves, well, how do we do this same thing? Do we, like the ancient Israelites, know and have this love that God has given us, and we are like, yeah, cool, I'll take that, but then we quickly turn around and give our affection and our attention to any other thing, hoping that we're going to gain something from that? And my guess is if we spent even a moment reflecting on that, we'd recognize really quickly how much we give our time, our attention, our money, our energy, our hopes and our dreams over to things like that. And so the call is, we don't want to end up like the woman in this story. Instead, we want to be the people that can return back to God and be satisfied with him and him alone. And so that's a challenge for us today. And as you've read through this passage and have been overwhelmed by this graphic imagery, it's a call for us to consider the idols in our own lives and to trust in the God who loves us and has given us his everything. So reflect on that today. And if you are struggling with this book or this passage in particular, I'd love to sit down and chat with you, pray with you, encourage you as well, because the image is that God's love is better. And so I hope that we can reflect on that. That's it. I'll see you later. Bye.